Hello and welcome to my destinations talk about the island of Tenerife, the largest of the Canary Islands, and its capital, Santa Cruz de Tenerife. Now, I am aware that the locals pronounce this Tenerife, but as we're also used to calling it Tenerife, I'm just going to stick with that. The Canary Islands are the southernmost autonomous community of Spain, and they lie in the Atlantic Ocean to the west of Morocco. There are 7 main islands, and moving from west to east, these are El Hierro, La Palma, La Gomera, Tenerife, Gran Canaria, Fuerteventura, and Lanzarote. And over 2 million people live on the Canary Islands, the majority of them on Tenerife and Gran Canaria. Their name has nothing at all to do with canaries, or indeed with any other kind of bird. They were originally given the Latin name Canaria Insulae, which means the island of dogs. In fact, the name really only referred to Gran Canaria, which according to the Latin writer Pliny the Elder, had vast multitudes of dogs of very large size. The original settlers on the islands, the Guanches, also worshipped mummified dogs. So, not named after the birds, but most likely the birds were named after the islands. The islands are volcanic in origin and are millions of years old. Lanzarote and Fuerteventura are thought to be between 16 and 20 million years old, while Tenerife and La Gomera are much younger at 8 to 13 million years old. Apart from some Neolithic settlers in about 3000 BC, the first settlers were the Guanches in the 2nd century BC. And these people probably came across from West Africa, and they're thought to be Berber in origin. If you go to La Candelaria to the southwest of Santa Cruz de Tenerife, while you're on the island, you will see these bronze statues of 9 Guanche rulers. In AD 24, King Juba II of Mauritania reconquered the islands, but for many centuries they were almost forgotten and left to the Guanches. And then in 1312, Captain Lanzarote Malicello landed on the island of Lanzarote, which was named after him. In the years following, Italians, Portuguese and Catalans all plundered the islands for slaves and furs, until 1402 when the Norman knight Jean de Betancourt arrived. And encountering little resistance, he claimed the island for the Catalan king. He then went on to take control of El Hierro, La Gomera and Fuerteventura. Over the next few decades, both the Portuguese and the Spanish laid claim to the islands, until in 1479 the Alcazovas Treaty gave Spain the Canary Islands, while Portugal annexed Madeira, the Azores and the Cape Verde Islands. So now that I've explained how the islands became a part of Spain, let's look more closely at Tenerife. Tenerife is the largest of the Canary Islands and has a population of just over 900,000 people. It's about 185 miles from the west coast of West Africa and is almost central within the Canaries archipelago. Remember my subtitle of White Mountain on the opening slide. If you were to translate this into the language of the Guanches, you would get the name Tenerife. This is the White Mountain though, Mount Teide, and at about 12,198 feet high, it's the highest mountain in Spain. The range of landscape and things to do is so vast in Tenerife that one day you can be climbing up the highest mountain in the country, the next you can be soaking up the sun on a beach like this. Unfortunately, often on a cruise you're only going to be there for one day, so you have some choices to make. Let's have a look at where you could go. Well, first, the capital and the main port is up in the northeastern corner of the island. This is Santa Cruz de Tenerife, circled on this map. There are lots of interesting things to do in Santa Cruz alone. So before we go further around the island, let me take you on a bit of a tour of the town. Before I get into the details of the town, let me then tell you a bit first about the cruise terminal. Cruise port at Santa Cruz is the second largest in Spain after Barcelona, and this means that there could be a number of both cruise ships and ferries in there at the same time as you are. The port area is then quite extensive and is shown circled on this map. The town of Santa Cruz is roughly where the building's icon is shown, about half to 3/4 of a mile away from the cruise port. The port authorities often provide a shuttle bus to take you from where you dock to the exit of the port area, so do check on this when you arrive. From the exit you can take an elevator to the main part of the town centre, and this centres on the Plaza de España, which, as you can see, is in the centre of the town close to the seafront. Once you've arrived, you have a variety of transportation options. You will find taxis at the cruise port. Taxis on Tenerife are white with a narrow blue stripe, and they are metered. If you want to use a taxi for a tour, you'll have to negotiate a price, but you need to expect to pay somewhere around 150 to 200 euros for a full day. There is also an extensive bus network on the island operated by Teide. The main bus station in Santa Cruz is on the Avenida 3 de Mayo. Now this is quite a walk, roughly about a mile away from the Plaza de España, but it does serve the entire island with buses. So if you wanted to travel to other parts, then it may be worth your while to perhaps take a taxi from the port to the main bus station. And then once you get to the main bus station, you can get to most places of interest on the island. But do check the times of the return though. You don't want to miss the ship sailing. There's also a tram system around Santa Cruz and La Laguna, and these operate at 15 or 20-minute intervals throughout the day. There are two lines. You will need line 1 if you want to go to La Laguna. The stop at Fundación is the most convenient one from the Plaza de España, and you can see from the small map on the right that it's just a short walk along the red arrow between the two. Lastly, in terms of local transport, there is a hop-on, hop-off or ho-ho bus in Santa Cruz, and it has 11 stops and the route begins at the Plaza de España. So, in taking you around Santa Cruz, we'll begin then at the Plaza de España, both because this is near the port exit where the shuttle bus will drop off and pick up, and also because this is where the main tourist information office is located, as well as being where you can get on the ho-ho bus. Despite its futuristic look, the square was constructed 90 years ago in 1929. It was, though, refurbished in 2006. It was built on the old castle of San Cristobal, which used to be the city's main line of defence, particularly against pirates. The refurbishment unearthed some of the walls and underground structure of the old castle. One of the things that you can't miss in the Plaza de España is this, the Monumento de los Caídos, built to commemorate the victims of the Spanish Civil War. To the left of the monument, as we look at it in this picture, is the Cabildo Insular. This was built in the 1930s and is where the main Tenerife council offices are, and it's also where you'll find the Tourist Information Office. From the Plaza de España, there are a couple of sightseeing walks that you could do, although it's also possible to combine them into one longer walk. So I'll take you through them as two separate walks. The first begins with a short walk west, that's away from the sea, from the Plaza de España to the Plaza de la Candelaria. Now, despite appearances, this is a much older square than the Plaza de España, having been laid out in 1701. It's a popular place to meet and just to walk around. You'll also find a number of tax-free shops here. In the square, you'll also see this monument, El Triunfo de la Candelaria, depicting the patron saint of Tenerife, and it was sculpted in marble by the Italian sculptor Antonio Canova. If you walk through the Plaza de la Candelaria away from the Plaza de España, you will come to the main pedestrianised shopping street of Santa Cruz, which is the Calle Castillo, and that's shown by the long green arrow. And here you'll find shops selling electrical goods, watches, designer clothes, embroidery and handicrafts. Maybe the kind of things you'd like to take home as souvenirs. The next place to talk about is the Iglesia San Francisco, or the Church of San Francisco, and the arrow shows you how to get there from the Plaza de la Candelaria. This Franciscan abbey was founded in 1680 and it was extended and restored in the 18th century. Inside there's a wooden altar from the 17th century and a pulpit with painted decorations, and it's also the parish church of Santa Cruz. Opposite the church is the Museo Municipal de Bellas Artes, or the Fine Arts Museum. And dating back to 1898, the museum contains old masters from the Prado in Madrid, as well as works by Spanish painters. There are local paintings, particularly of landscapes around Santa Cruz and La Laguna. From here you can walk along the Villalba Hervas back to the Plaza de España, either for a drink or a tapas break, or to go back to your ship if you've had enough walking for one day. Or you can start on the second of my 2 sightseeing walks from the Plaza de España. For the next walk, you need to head south from the plaza down Avenida de Bravo Murillo, and this is left off the plaza as you look at it like it's shown in this picture. A few blocks down on this street and you will come on your right to the Iglesia de Nuestra Señora de la Concepción, and with its distinctive black and white tower, it's really hard to miss this church. The church was originally built in 1498 but underwent a lot of reconstruction work in the 18th century, resulting in the church much as you see it today. It has a very richly decorated interior, and it also houses many of the historical artifacts and treasures of Santa Cruz, such as the silver cross from which the town takes its name. It also houses British flags that were captured during Nelson's failed attack on Tenerife in 1797. This was a double disaster for Nelson, as not only did he lose the Battle of Tenerife, he also had to have part of his arm amputated as a result of the cannon injury. The locals are still very proud of their defeat of the British, as they still have on display the Tiger cannon that blew off Nelson's arm, and on July 25th each year they hold a reenactment of the battle. Just a few minutes away by walk from the church is the Museum of Nature and Man, or in Spanish the Museo de la Naturaleza y el Hombre. And this used to be a military hospital, but now houses a museum devoted to the geology, archaeology, flora and fauna of the Canary Islands, as well as mummies and skulls of the Guanches. Just next door to the museum you will find TEA, or the Tenerife Arts Centre. This new building contains modern photography, painting and sculpture exhibits. Some of these are on permanent display, while others are temporary exhibitions. A couple of minutes walk from TEA along the Avenida de San Sebastián, and then a quarter away around the roundabout to the left brings you to the Mercado de Nuestra Señora de Africa. And this market first opened in 1946 and is built in the style of a North African market. There are various sections to it, including a conventional food market, a shopping centre and an area with a range of cafes, bars and restaurants. So those are the main sites within walking distance of the Plaza de España, but there are just 2 or 3 more that I'll mention that are a bit farther away, but for the more energetic amongst you, still within walking distance. Firstly, if you fancy a bit of a ramble, is La Rambla, and if you've ever been to Barcelona, you will undoubtedly have had a walk along La Rambla. Well, Santa Cruz has one too. The map here shows you the direction from the Plaza de España, but not street by street directions. For that you'll need to use the town map that you can get from the tourist office. It's about a 3/4 of a mile walk. And La Rambla stretches from the Plaza de la Paz to the Avenida de Anaga. and is effectively a very wide pedestrianised central reservation between two lanes of traffic. It is, though, a very pleasant walk along here with places to sit and people watch. It's also a bit of an outdoor sculpture gallery with many pieces of modern art to see as you stroll along. Also located on La Rambla is the now disused bull ring. It was opened in 1893 and it hosted its last bullfight in 1983. After being used for a variety of events, it finally closed in 2003. A bit farther away in the opposite direction is the very modern Auditorio de Tenerife. This is about a mile from the Plaza de España, following the coast road southwards. And this futuristic-looking concert hall opened in 2003 and is home to the Symphony Orchestra of Tenerife. It was designed by the Spanish architect Santiago Calatrava. Nearby there are two further attractions. Firstly, the Castillo de San Juan, built in 1641 to protect the safety of the port and particularly its trade in African slaves. And across from the Auditorio is the Parque Marítimo César Manrique, a water park and gardens opened in 1995. It was designed by César Manrique but didn't actually open until after his death. So having taken you around the town of Santa Cruz, let's now go round the island of Tenerife, beginning with La Laguna. Now also, although Santa Cruz is now the capital of Tenerife, it wasn't always that way, because that accolade used to go to San Cristobal de la Laguna. Now, as you can see from the map, La Laguna is fairly close to Santa Cruz, and it's possible to visit there independently. In fact, it's easily done by tram from Santa Cruz. So if you've done Santa Cruz before and don't want to venture too far away, then there's enough in La Laguna to occupy you for most of the day. La Laguna was founded in 1496 and until 1723 it was the capital of Tenerife. It's now a UNESCO World Heritage Site. The colourful old town is home to many old houses or casas, many dating back to the 16th, 17th and 18th century. There are also some notable ecclesiastical buildings. The cathedral is obviously one of these. The facade is from 1825, but inside there are altarpieces dating back to the 18th century. Even older is the Iglesia de Nuestra Señora de la Concepción, which was built in 1502, soon after the founding of the town. There are also some very pleasant places, such as the Plaza de Adelantado, just to sit, have a break from sightseeing, and people watch for a while. So now let me take you to some more of the interesting parts of the rest of the island of Tenerife, beginning by travelling up the northeastern coast from Santa Cruz to the old fishing village of San Andres. Now this area was originally settled by the Guanches, but then conquered by the Castilians in 1498. And San Andres is where you will find the Las Terrasitas beach. The sand here was imported from the Spanish Sahara, all 250,000 tons of it. We stay in the north of the island by visiting the village of Tacoronte, whose name is derived from the Guanche word Tagoror, meaning place where the Council of Elders meets. And you head out to the northern coast through the old capital of La Laguna and the village of Tacoronte. Out towards the coast from Tacoronte is the village of El Sozal, with some of the best panoramic coastal views in the north of Tenerife. If you continue down the coast road from Tacoronte, you will get to Humboldt's viewpoint. And from here you have this superb view of both the coast and the Orotava Valley. And I'll tell you more about La Orotava, the main town in the valley, later. But just to say something about Alexander von Humboldt, he was a Prussian naturalist and explorer, and the Humboldt penguin was named after him. He was also the first person to describe the problem and the cause of human-induced climate change as early as 1800. And It's around this part of the island in La Guancha and Ico del Alte that the Canarian potatoes are grown. At the Mirador del Lance, you can see the village of Los Realejos, as well as Puerto de la Cruz and La Orotava. The large bronze sculpture that you see in the picture is of Mense Bentor, a king of the Guanche people, watching over the viewpoint. Instead of being captured by the Spanish troops who conquered the island, Mendes Benton chose to leap to his death from this spot. Before leaving the north part of the island, let me tell you of a few more places of interest. Beyond San Andres and past the Terrasitas beach that I mentioned earlier, you can go on to the high point of El Bailadero, where you'll get a great view of the surrounding area. It's said that El Bailadero was the place where witches used to gather to dance and practice their magic. You can then travel on to the Anaga Mountains, right in the north of Tenerife, and to the village of Taganana, where you will find some of the best of the local wine and cheese. From there, it's one site or viewpoint after another, beginning with the Mercedes Forest, del Ingles, Mirador del Carmen. You will get a magnificent view of the northern coast and the countryside from all of these viewpoints. You can then return to Santa Cruz through the old capital of La Laguna. Now, I mentioned the Orotava Valley earlier, but I'd like to focus more on the town of La Orotava. As you can see, the Orotava Valley itself is in the middle of Tenerife. It stretches from the northern coast to the foot of Mount Teide, when it reaches a height of about 2,000 meters. The town of La Orotava is a beautifully preserved old town where you'll find the old Tenerife with cobbled streets and Canarian mansions. In fact, it features some of the best of 17th and 18th century Canarian architecture, and its steep cobbled streets make it a delight to explore. Wandering around the town, you will see the houses and gardens. Look out particularly for the Casa de los Balcones, with its hand-carved wooden balconies. And if you fancy stopping for a typical Canarian lunch, make a stop at the restaurant El Monasterio. After lunch, you could drive out to the coast, to Puerto de la Cruz. Here you'll find shops, tree-lined avenues, bars and cafes, or you could just find somewhere to sit and people watch before driving back to the ship. For the more culturally inclined, Puerto de la Cruz also has a number of interesting museums and churches. The northern coast around Puerto de la Cruz also tends to be a bit cooler and more like spring than summer. As well as driving yourself there, you can also get the 103 bus to Puerto de la Cruz from Santa Cruz, and the 103 also stops in La Laguna on the way. Puerto de la Cruz is a family resort, and nearby is the Loro Park aquatic and wildlife attraction. Also close to Puerto de la Cruz is the Jardín Botánico, and this was founded in 1788 by King Charles III of Spain, so that plants brought back from the New World could acclimatise before being transferred onto mainland Europe. These include a huge South American fig tree. From the botanical gardens, you could go on to the Sitio Litra orchid gardens, which have the largest collection of orchids in the Canary Islands. The village of Masca is so small that it doesn't even feature on my map, but it's roughly where the circle is. It's a small mountain village with about 90 inhabitants, but one that gets overrun with tourists during the day. The southern coasts of Tenerife are much hotter, and are where many of the large holiday resorts and beaches are to be found. Places like Playa de las Americas and Los Cristianos are probably the largest of the lot. Now, if I said you could visit the pyramids on Tenerife, what would you expect? The smooth-sided ones of Egypt or the stepped ones of Mexico? Well, the Guimar pyramids in Tenerife are probably more like the Mexican ones. And you can get there by driving through the Esperanza or Hope Forest. This pine forest is very popular among hikers. The area around the forest is central to a part of Spanish history because in 1936, General Franco led a military coup from here against the Spanish government, thus starting the Spanish Civil War. After the Esperanza forest, continue on to the Guimar Pyramids. These are nearer to the coast, south of Santa Cruz. There are 6 of these in total, all built from lava blocks. The history and meaning of these pyramids is still hotly debated. The explorer Thor Heyerdahl of Kon-Tiki fame always reckoned that there was a link between Egypt and Central America, and that the presence of these on Tenerife showed that the island was a stopping point on voyages between the two, possibly built by the Guanches. However, archaeology has dated them to the 19th century. It's also thought that there's an astronomical aspect to them, and it's been shown that some of the sides align with the sun at the summer and winter solstice. A further theory is that they were constructed according to Masonic symbolism. Well, whatever the truth, try to find a guide at the pyramids who will tell you about these theories. Moving back up the southeast coast from Guimar to Santa Cruz, you'll find the town of Candelaria. And here the Basilica is the main site of Catholic pilgrimage in the Canary Islands and one of the most important in Spain. So apart from the Orotava Valley, I've stuck to talking about places near to the coast of Tenerife. And I haven't yet mentioned one of the most visited places in the island, and that is El Teide. The summit of Mount Teide is the highest point of both Tenerife and Spain as a whole. Mount Teide has been designated a World Heritage Site by UNESCO, and although we generally talk of it as a standalone, there is another volcanic peak, Pico Viejo, close by, which is only 1,800 feet or so shorter. Pico Viejo last erupted in the 18th century, whereas the last eruption of Teide was in 1909, and it is still considered an active volcano. Both peaks lie within the Teide National Park. The crater of Mount Teide is a massive 29 miles in circumference, and this 3D rotating image from NASA probably gives you the best impression of the site of the main crater, within which are the 2 peaks, Pico del Teide and Pico Viejo. Now let me make it clear that you won't be able to go up to the summit of Teide. You need to have a special permit to do that. You can go, though, into the large crater that you could see on the 3D picture and into the National Parador Visitors Centre. You can also visit the Teide Observatory, and you can take a cable car that will take you up to about 12,000 feet above sea level. At this height it will be colder, windier and also less oxygen, so prepare appropriately for this. The Teide Observatory, circled on this map, is close to Mount Teide in Izaña, but it's not on Teide itself, which is marked with the star. The observatory is the largest solar observatory in the world, and along with Chile and Hawaii, the Canary Islands are considered to be the best location in the world for astronomical observations. And you can take a tour of this remarkable observatory and take a closer look at one of the many telescopes within the complex. After visiting the observatory, you can then go on to the cable car. This starts at the lower station at 7,730 feet above sea level, and in 8 minutes the cable car will take you up Mount Teide to the upper station at 11,660 feet above sea level. This is about 500 feet short of the actual summit, but as I said, you need a permit to go right to the top. You will, though, see amazing views across the island and possibly to the neighbouring island of La Gomera from up there. There's Wi-Fi, toilets and Spain's highest public telephone, but there's no cafe. So that, just for some bits of useful information to finish up with, the currency is the euro. The average daily high temperatures in Tenerife range from about 21 to 22 degrees Celsius in the winter months to about 28 to 29 degrees Celsius in the summer. The average daily low temperatures range from about 16 Celsius in the winter up to about 21 Celsius in the summer. Rainfall ranges from 30 to 40 millimetres per month in the winter to hardly any in the summer. And sunshine ranges from an average of about 6 hours a day in the winter months up to 10 to 11 hours a day on average in the summer. As far as the shops are concerned, there are some small shops in the Plaza de la Candelaria, just inland from the large Plaza de España, but the main shopping street in Santa Cruz is the one I spoke about earlier, the Calle Castillo. If you want to spend a penny, there are public toilets close to the Plaza de España. There's another one in La Rambla and yet another in the park next to La Rambla. Bars and cafes will of course let you use their toilets if you buy a drink there. So I hope this has given you some ideas of things to do while you're in Tenerife in general and in Santa Cruz in particular. So thank you for listening, thank you for watching, and try some of my other destination talks.